Good morning, everybody. As we continue our Tar Water Academy training this morning, I'm going to be talking about stock tank heaters. So we'll start with some general information that kind of covers like all of our stock tank heaters. So, as a general rule, all of our stock tank heaters, number one, they have a built-in thermostat. So they will turn themselves off, they'll turn themselves on. The customer doesn't need to do anything. That thermostat is not adjustable. It's internal to the heater. Um, as a general rule, they turn on at about 38 degrees Fahrenheit and they turn off at about 45 degrees Fahrenheit. So if you have a customer that calls in and they think that their heater's not working because the water isn't warm to the touch, let them know it won't be. It's not meant to be. It's just supposed to keep it from freezing. Um, Another thing that I think is worthy to be said, all of these stock tank heaters are made to be around water, right? I mean, that's their purpose. But we don't want to ignore electrical safety. So one thing that we want to make sure when customers ask about putting these things outside, you want them plugged into a GFCI outlet. Now that's the outlet you find in your bathroom that's got that test and reset button. Those are specifically designed for locations where things might get wet. It protects against ground faults. And one of the big things with these are if you don't have a ground fault protection and these get a short, it can actually electrify the water in the tank and it can electrocute an animal. So it's important that they plug them into a GFCI. Another thing to be careful of is cord management, especially with livestock, and cattle are probably the worst. Cattle love to pick at anything that's new. If there's a cord somewhere, they'll want to grab it, they'll want to chew on it. Some of these heaters have built-in wire guards to kind of help prevent chewing. Not all of them do. General rule of thumb, try to keep a cord in a spot where they can't get to it or where they're not going to see it. Because obviously if a cow starts chewing on a live electrical cord, they could get shocked, even electrocuted. So just want to be careful if customers have questions. Make sure we stress safety with these things. Okay, so we're already talking about electrical safety. Obviously, all of my stock tank heaters we sell in the store run on electricity. They do make stock tank heaters that run on propane, and that's for areas like if you're out in a field somewhere, you don't have power. We don't stock propane stock tank heaters. They're very expensive, but we do have access to buy them through a company called Trojan Specialty Products. If somebody wants to order one, we can order them for the customer. Sarah right now is currently the buyer for Trojan Specialty Products. So if somebody does want to get a propane stock tank heater, get them with Sarah. So the last thing I want to say is a general rule on stock tank heaters. You need to make sure we're asking the customer what is the material of the tank they are putting these in. Stock tanks come in metal, they come in plastic. Some heaters are not okay to put in a plastic tank. They get hot enough, if they get against the side, they can melt the side of the tank. On the front of the box, on every one of these, it will tell you whether or not you can put it in a plastic tank. It'll say things like safe for plastic, or it will say metal tanks only, or it might say okay for use in all tanks. Well, that means it is plastic safe. You can use it. So if you have any questions, just look at the box. They put it right on that description list on the front. It'll tell you which kind of tanks you can use it in. Okay, so let's jump into the main line of stock tank heaters. And that main line comes in three different varieties. There's submersibles, there's floating, and then there's combination, which means they can either float or they can sink. So submersibles, we'll talk about those first. Those are going to be some of the most common sales that we see. They come in a lot of different varieties. This guy's got a low profile. He's great for like a bird bath, but can also be used in a small stock tank. This guy's perfect for a stock tank or going into a cattle water or something like that. So what these do, you put them in the tank, you drop them down to the bottom, and they heat all of the water in the tank. Now, that being said, these are great for small tanks, but they are not powerful enough to take care of a big tank. It will say on the box how many gallons these are rated for. These come in different sizes. As a general rule, a 250 watt heater is good for up to 25 gallons. A 500 watt heater is good to up to 50 gallons. So kind of watch. The boxes look the same, but you'll be able to see 250 watt versus 500 watt. Same thing on this guy. He's a DT250, 250 watt. There's a DT500. So, but these are good for a homeowner if they have a koi pond that they're trying to keep ice out of. These usually work pretty good for things like that. Yes, Roxy.
So I had a few people buy the multi-use one on the right, your left, for their bird bath.
And yes, it's perfectly fine for a bird bath. Some people don't like them just because they're a bigger profile, so they're bulkier, they take up more room in the bird bath, but it doesn't hurt a thing. Yep. Because both of those two I was holding up, they operate the exact same way. So, and they're plastic safe. They don't get hot enough that if a bird lands on it, it's not going to burn the bird. So they're perfectly safe. They're great for that. Okay, so that's submersibles. Let's move on to floating. Now, floating stock tank heaters, these are designed for larger tanks, and they float up on top. They are not made to heat all the water in the tank. They're made to prevent ice from forming on the top of the tank. And these are good for larger tanks. So here's sorry, I grabbed a sinking, but they're going to look like this, very similar to this. The floating style have a float that keeps them up on top. Now, note that this guy is actually plastic safe, but because there is a guard, that guard prevents the element from making contact with the side or bottom of the tank. So I have some over there that are floating style that don't have a guard. Those are not safe for plastic. These run at a higher wattage. If they get up against the side of the tank, they can melt it. But I also sell the guards by themselves. So if a customer wants that other style, they can buy a guard, attach it to the heater, and it'll prevent it from making contact with the tank. So again, larger stock tanks, only going to keep ice from forming on the top. But if you can keep an open hole with no ice at the top of your stock tank, cattle will be able to get a drink. They're really good at, if there's a hole there, they can actually enlarge that hole themselves. They lick the ice, they drink, water movement, and it all kind of helps open it up. Next, we're going to talk about combination or convertible stock tank heaters. This guy is either a floating or a sinking. So if you unscrew the float off the top, it'll sink down to the bottom. Leave the float on, it'll float up on top. So this gives the customer the option to use it in a lot of different tanks. This one is plastic safe, so good for a plastic stock tank. So just the benefits of both of these combined into one unit. So specialty heaters. We carry a lot of other heaters that help with different, all of these were for stock tanks, larger pools of water. We also carry heated bowls. I didn't bring one with me. You guys understand this. Heated pet bowls. We got them in a 1 quart or a 5 quart. You plug them in, it keeps the water inside from freezing. We also have heated 5-gallon buckets. So if you have like 1 cow in a stall, 5-gallon bucket, it's going to be pretty good. You're going to have to fill it more often, but it keeps the water from freezing. I also have a bucket heater. It's a heater that's meant to go into a 5-gallon bucket, so you can do that. Same principle. The other one, this one's kind of interesting. This is a drain plug heater. So this guy is safe for use in all tanks. They're universal, and what you do is you remove the drain plug out of your stock tank, you feed the cord through, and this becomes your new plug for the stock tank, and then heats everything from the bottom. One of the nice things about these is we talked about cord management. These allow you to get the heater out of sight of the animal, so they're not going to be going after it. And it gets that cord down on ground level. You can kind of route it where you want it. So these are great for keeping animals from messing with cords. Sometimes cows, if you have a floating stock tank heater, cows will actually grab them and pull them out of the stock tank and drop them on the ground. Because cows, they like to mess with everything. So a guy like this, cow's not going to be able to pull this one out of the tank. It's going to be there, and it's going to be solid. Last of all, let's talk about poultry waterers. So you really have two options when it comes to heating a poultry waterer. Submersibles do not work for poultry waterers. That's a common question we get from customers, and that's because of the way a poultry waterer works. It requires a seal, a vacuum seal, to prevent the water from overflowing. So you can't puncture that seal. You can't make a hole for the cord, and so if you did, all the water would just run out of the waterer. So you cannot use a submersible inside of a poultry waterer. So there's really two options. You can buy a full poultry waterer that has a heated base, which we sell, or you can buy just a base to go with your water. Now, special note, these are only designed to be used with metal poultry waterers. They're not made to be used with plastic. And on this guy, it's not the issue necessarily that it'll melt the plastic. This really doesn't get hot enough for that. This requires that metal on metal contact. Metal is a great conductor of heat. It needs that metal water to draw the heat up out of the base and up into the water. So if you put a plastic one on, you'll actually end up icing up on your plastic water because it can't conduct the heat like a metal one can. So a lot of guys will run metal waterers year round, and then in the winter, they'll put these guys in. One last thing to note is remind the customer that when winter is over, it's a good idea to remove these things from the stock tanks, remove them, and clean them up and store them. If you leave submersibles in year round, which you can do, they're not going to run because they're on a thermostat, but it tends to cause wear and tear, and they'll just wear out faster. So I like to be economical for our customers, so it's a good idea to take them out at the end of the season, and you can usually get multiple seasons out of them. Guys that leave them in year round, oftentimes they only get a year or a year and a half out of one of these, and it's because of the wear and tear, the constant movement of cattle drinking, things like that. So any questions on stock tank heaters?